Welcome to On the Hill. A few short years ago, the idea of incorporating games into education would have been frowned upon. But with technological advancements, today educators are making use of a theory called gamification. Could this be the future of education, or is it just another trend?
So gamification has been defined in lots of different kinds of ways, and the perspective I like the most is that it relates to lessons we learn from the gaming domain and to the application of those lessons in non-gaming contexts with the intention of changing behavior. So we need to be clear that gamification and games are not the same thing. It relates to drawing lessons from game design and applying it to non-game environments.
Scholars feel that education has been changed quite a bit in the last decade, and the gamification of education has become increasingly popular in recent years.
What I see right now is a lot of interest in this area and a lot more publications coming out and projects being funded and things like that. So there's clearly a trend. Whether it's actually getting into the curriculum in universities is still debatable. I think it's happening in a few places and in a few isolated places, but it's not widespread yet.
If you look at education, and increasingly I think over recent years, students have become very mark-focused, very outcome-focused, very objective-focused. They're not, and this is not their fault, this is the way the system is engineered, okay? So it's the system has produced this outcome, where mastery of the subject is secondary. It's, do I get the grade? And if I'm being examined to get that grade, then there's pressure on the instructors to teach to the exam, so to speak.
Sheldon, a professor and accomplished game writer, made the decision to gamify one of the courses he taught at Indiana University. He did so by abandoning grades and implementing an experience point system. The Hatchinger report stated that perhaps the most striking change Sheldon made was to grade his students on experience points, also known as XP. Students started with 0 experience and could level up by completing quests or raids. Eventually, the amount of experience each student earned determined his or her final grade.
I think that education currently tries to set some objectives, but I don't think it always does so in a way that you feel as committed to it as in a video game. Like you could say, like, I really want to get like a 90 on this paper for this course this semester, but it doesn't feel as satisfying or like you're driven as much as if you're in a video game and you're like, oh my god, I didn't collect 5 little tokens to complete the level. Like, yeah, education would be a lot more fun if it was gamified.
In our interview with David Kaufman, a professor that teaches within the Department of Education at SFU, he mentions that some universities have been developing their own video games to optimize students' learning experience. For example, MIT has developed a game on American history. On the other hand, David and his colleagues focus more on the use of frame games in educational context.
We take a game that's a typical board game that people know how to play. For example, Snakes and Ladders, Parcheesi, Tic-Tac-Toe, now Bingo, for example. And what we do is we create a frame or a template on the web so that, and the way the game works is you see the game screen, the game board, for example, on the screen, and when it's time to make your move, you're presented with a question. A question pops up on the screen, and you have to answer that question accurately in order to make your moves.
Among the students surveyed, many felt that applying game mechanics to education would be fun, interesting, a nice change, and when it's properly used, it would spark interest on learning.
I think it's sort of an inevitability, since education has a lot of marking, it has numbers, and sort of numbers is something that you can really play around with with game mechanics. And again, it's sort of, you're trying to learn something, you want to be incentivized to learn, and the best way to do that is to apply game mechanics.
You know, if that could be somehow applied to the educational system, it could capture a lot more of people's attention. It could be more interesting.
I think it would be a good idea because like children nowadays are more into video games and technology and stuff. So it would be better if those games would be more educational than, just simply playing them.
However, There is a fine line between incorporating game theory into education and misinterpreting it, resulting in edutainment.
So the upside is we can change behavior, we can take some things that people may not have wanted to do and we can gamify them, and all of a sudden they find it interesting. You know, you get points and you can compete and there's a leaderboard maybe and all those kinds of things. But if we don't do it right, then the risk is that we are more entertaining than we're educational.
It is essential that gamification is properly utilized in order to produce positive and effective educational results. In addition, one should pay attention to the particular behavior that they want to change using gamification theories.
What would be more interesting is if you looked at something like self-determination theory, which talks about the ideas in games of, am I showing competence in a skill? Is this being recognized by people? Am I connecting with other people that value that skill? Because if you do those things, people feel inspired to work on something, okay? So if that was the motivating medium for students, they would undertake these activities not just because of the game of the activities, but because they found the game rewarding.
Gamification can be utilized as a positive productivity and educational tool, or if incorrectly incorporated, it can become a negative means of education. Regardless, an increasing amount of instructors see it as a positive form of communicating educational material and successfully teaching it in an alternative and new way.
It's not a cure-all for everything, and that's I think why it's been criticized quite heavily, but in the right context with the right kinds of mechanics, I think it can achieve some good behavioral changes.
Cythia Yip on the Hill.